The government pledges billions of pounds to improve transport outside London. England's city regions will get the cash to the delight of metro mayors.
It feels like a real breakthrough for levelling up today. The government feels as though it's listening and buying in to the Greater Manchester vision, so it's a good day.
But with billions in other pledges in the Chancellor's budget next week, where's the money coming from? Also tonight, it's claimed the actor Alec Baldwin was told a gun was safe moments before he fatally shot a crew member on the set of his new film. The world's biggest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, says it wants to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2060. And England's cricketers begin their T20 World Cup campaign by thrashing the champions, the West Indies. Good evening. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is promising to spend almost £7 billion improving transport outside London in England's city regions. It's one of a number of spending pledges to be unveiled in Wednesday's budget. He says a transport revolution will bring public services around the country in line with the capital. Labour says the government lacks a coherent plan to transform regional economies and tackle the climate crisis. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Austin.
Whether it's for work or leisure, how easy is it to get about where you live? Greater Manchester is one area set to receive cash to spend on transport improvements, such as tram upgrades and bus corridors.
I think it's going to be a great idea for Bulletin, and it will save time on people like using buses and trains. Direct link straight in and be it proper for the environment as well.
If there was a convenient tram from Preston to Manchester, I'd definitely consider it.
It'll be for regional authorities to decide exactly how the money is spent.
This is not a day for any negativity. It feels like a real breakthrough for levelling up today. The government feels as though it's listening and buying in to the Greater Manchester vision, so it's a good day.
Next week, the Chancellor is expected to confirm £5.7 billion for a range of projects in England's big city regions, £1.5 billion more than had been anticipated. It's meant to help bridge the gap between transport provision in the capital and other places, including the West Midlands. At this cinema in Digbeth in Birmingham, staff think better local links would be good for business.
It would be a great help, again, not just for the customers but for the staff as well. They're coming from all over and it's, an important job to them, and it would just make life a lot easier. A lot of the time they're just having to get taxis home or things like that, whereas a tram would be great, to kind of really just be a simple but bit of a cheaper solution.
Just over £1 billion will go towards introducing simpler fares and faster journeys on local buses, using London's services as the model. That's part of an existing £3 billion promise.
We think that it's not so much of a north-south divide, but there are many areas across the whole country that feel left behind and need levelling up. So areas that have very infrequent bus services, no services in the evenings and the weekends, and these glaring gaps in current provision that need to be addressed.
In the lead up to the Chancellor outlining his wider spending plans in a few days' time, we're hearing about lots of these kinds of funding promises. But Rishi Sunak has also spoken about wanting to put the public finances on a sustainable footing, and we should soon find out more about how he intends to do that. Labour has accused the government of lacking a coherent plan and said other projects like delivering HS2 to Leeds were also critical. But the government says modernising the transport network is central to its levelling up agenda. Katie Austin, BBC News in Birmingham.
Well, our political correspondent Nick Eardley is in Downing Street for us tonight. Nick, just shy of £7 billion for transport, £500 million to support families in England. Probably more pledges as we get to the budget on Wednesday. Where is all this money coming from?
Well, Clive, despite the Treasury's intention to bring spending under control after the pandemic. The message from number 11 is there is still money to be spent, particularly when it comes to the government's big political priorities. The announcement today on transport outside London was designed to put some meat on the bones of the levelling up agenda. Critics have said that it was a soundbite, so the government will be delighted to hear the reaction of Manchester's Labour Mayor Andy Burnham there. But the Chancellor also has a challenge to persuade people he has a vision to deliver Boris Johnson's plan for a high productivity, high skills, high wage economy we've heard ministers talk about in recent days. Expect skills to be mentioned a lot over the next few days. But there are concerns in there about the economic backdrop to all of this, about how to balance the books, about how to combat inflation amid concerns that could have a devastating impact on the cost of government borrowing. And as we know around the country, concerns about the cost of living too. A lot for the Chancellor to weigh up.
Indeed. OK, Nick, thanks for that. Nick Early there at Westminster. Well, the government's latest coronavirus figures show there were 44,985 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means, on average, 47,638 new cases were reported per day in the last week. There were 8,238 people in hospital with COVID as of Thursday. 135 deaths were reported, that's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 133 deaths were announced every day. A prominent advisor to the government on COVID-19 is urging the public to do everything possible to reduce transmission of the virus. Professor Peter Openshaw says infection and death rates are currently unacceptable, and he's very fearful there could be another lockdown Christmas. The government maintains at the moment there's no need for stricter COVID measures in England and is encouraging all those who are eligible to get their booster jabs. With more, here's Eunice Muller.
As COVID infection rates continue to increase sharply in England and Wales and remain high across the UK, at the heart of the government's plans to deal with COVID this winter is getting people vaccinated. At this clinic on the Wirral in Merseyside, rising infections is a concern for people like Rachel, who has just lost a family member to the virus.
I lost my son-in-law last Sunday because we didn't have the vaccines. And the life support was turned off last Sunday. So it's important that everybody gets the first, second and mainly the booster.
Here, they're also trying to persuade some of the 5 million people across the UK who haven't come forward for their first jab.
We have not vaccinated 15 to 20% of the population. I think that poses a significant risk.
Although the government focus remains on vaccinations to deal with this pandemic, ministers are under pressure, with growing calls to go further and act sooner rather than later in introducing extra measures. One prominent government advisor has urged people to do what they can to reduce transmission of the virus.
Do everything possible in your control to try to reduce transmission. Don't wait for the government to change policy. The sooner we all act, the sooner we can get this transmission rate down and the greater the prospect of having a Christmas with our families.
Relying on vaccinations may not be enough. Average daily hospital admissions in England of people with COVID-19 have climbed to their highest level for nearly 8 months. Combined with the usual winter pressures such as flu, calls for government action may be difficult to ignore. Eunice Muller, BBC News, Wirral.
Court documents in America suggest the actor Alec Baldwin was told a gun was safe moments before he fatally shot a crew member on the set of his new film. The cinematographer Halyna Hutchins died from a wound to the chest. With more, here's our North America correspondent Sophie Long.
We miss you. The simple words of a husband and a son whose lives have been changed forever.
Santa Fe Fire and EMS, what's the location of the emergency?
In this audio released by the emergency services, you can hear the script supervisor calling for help, describing what happened just moments before.
We've had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie set by a gun. We need help immediately.
We now know that when Alec Baldwin was handed the weapon, he was told it was safe, what's called a cold gun. Yet the shot or shots it released killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins and seriously injured director Joel Souza. The person responsible for the safety of all weapons used on the Rust set was 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. As the daughter of a legendary Hollywood armourer, she'd been around guns all her life. But just a month ago, she spoke of her lack of experience in the job.
By all means, I'm still learning. But yeah, Dad has taught me everything. I think loading blanks was like the scariest thing to me because I was like, oh, I don't know anything about it.
There have been unconfirmed reports of complaints about safety standards on the set and that a number of crew walked out hours before the shooting happened. At this stage in the investigation, we don't know if Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was among those that remained. Helena Hutchins honed her craft here. One of her teachers said she had a unique perspective of the world. As her friends, family and industry grieve and search for answers, a candlelit vigil will be held near the film set where she lost her life doing what she loved. Sophie Long, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Ahead of next week's crucial climate summit in Glasgow, the environmental activist Greta Thunberg has called for honesty from world leaders about where they're falling down on combating climate change. Her comments came as Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter, says it's aiming to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2060. Greta Thunberg has been speaking to our science correspondent, Rebecca Morell.
It was a video that went viral. Greta Thunberg's surprise performance of Rick Astley's 80s hit. It was to launch the Climate Live concerts ahead of the UN climate talks in Glasgow. So what does Greta want to tell politicians at COP26?
Be honest about where you are, how you have been failing, how you are still failing us, and how they spend their time, instead of trying to find solutions, they seem to spend their time trying to come up with loopholes.
Greta Thunberg says the climate meetings are all talk but no action. This was her last month.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah, 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 blah.
You've accused politicians of just saying blah, blah, blah. Aren't you just saying blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, but that's the role of an activist, to organize marches, to have speeches, to organize events. It's not our job to be politicians.
What's it like being the face of climate activism?
I don't think people would recognize me in private if they met me. I appear very angry in the media, but I'm not. I'm too silly in private.
So will she ever stop campaigning?
After the COP, I don't know. I will go home, go back to school. And of course, you can't say this is the point where I will stop being an activist. It's not black and white like that.
Greta will be busy for a while yet as she prepares to head to Glasgow in the coming days. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
Now, with all the sport, here's Lizzie Greenwood-Hughes at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, Lizzie.
Hello, thank you, Clive. Good evening. England's cricketers had the best possible start to the T20 World Cup in Dubai, thrashing the defending champions West Indies by 6 wickets after bowling them all out for just 55 runs. Our correspondent Joe Wilson reports.
The cricketers of West Indies and England shared the stance against racism at the T20 World Cup. Well, they share memories in this competition. The last final, when Carlos Brathwaite's magnificent sixes took the trophy away from England. The best of times, the worst of times. But it motivated England. They're now ranked top of the world in this format, and from this moment, we saw why.
Moeen Ali, what a catch!
The West Indies side was mature. Chris Gale, now 42, made 13. Success for Tamal Mills on his England comeback. Dwayne Bravo, Johnny Bairstow caught it. The captain's brain beneath the caps. Everything Owen Morgan thought worked, and how West Indies obliged. Where England's fielders stood was where their batters hit. There. 4 wickets for Adil Rashid. 55 all out. Completely the new England. Their batting, however, wasn't perfect. Akeal Hussein's agility to catch Liam Livingstone. 4 wickets down, but in just the 9th over it was done. England looked like world #1. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
England beat Northern Ireland 4-0 in today's historic Women's Football International at Wembley. It means they stay top of their World Cup qualifying group. Northern Ireland are 3rd. Our correspondent Joe Corrie was watching.
This is a landmark day here at Wembley. Walking into the history books, England women's first ever competitive match at Wembley. For semi-professional Northern Ireland, an opportunity to test themselves against their full-time neighbours. It was Lauren Hemp who struck first, the woodwork that is. With goalkeeper Jacqueline Burns beaten, only the frame of the goal could deny the Lionesses an opener. And that set the tone for England's first half. Lots of chances created, but one way or another, the Lionesses couldn't find a breakthrough. A change of ends, however, brought about a change of fortune for England as substitute Beth Mead, who'd only been on the pitch a matter of seconds, acrobatically turned the ball home. And that lead was doubled shortly afterwards. Lauren Hemp with the ball in, Beth England at the back post to make sure. England now on a roll with Mead at it again, this time slamming the ball home for her second of the night.
Brilliant for England!
And she wasn't done yet, as she wrapped up the win and her 14-minute hat-trick with this simple finish. Job done for the home side. 3 wins from 3 in the qualifying campaign.
So in the end, a night to remember for England and in particular for Beth Mead. Next up, the Lionesses travel to Latvia on Tuesday, the same night that Northern Ireland host Austria, aiming to put this defeat behind them. Jo Corrie, BBC News, Wembley Stadium.
Match of the day and sports scene are on later, so don't listen if you want to wait for the football results because they are coming now. Top v Bottom lived up to its billing as Chelsea thrashed Norwich 7-0 to move 2 points clear at the top of the Premier League. England's Mason Mount won the match ball after scoring a hat-trick. Elsewhere, there were wins for Manchester City and Watford. Hearts are the new leaders of the Scottish Premiership. They drew with Dundee to leapfrog Rangers, who play tomorrow. And there was a clean sweep for England's rugby league sides in their one-off internationals against France. The women started things off with a 40-4 victory in Perpignan. Then afterwards, at the same ground, the men won 30-10. And that's a sport. Back to you, Clive.
Lizzie, thanks for that. And that's it from me and the rest of the team. Have a very good night.